You're listening to the Gutsy Podcast, where we talk about all things real, raw, and ridiculous about running a business authentically. I'm Laura Wallace, also known as the Laura Aura, lover of all things inspirational, owner of Works Graphic Design, and your host on this journey through entrepreneurship. I'm here to help you get out of your head and back into action as a passionate business rock star. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday as we fuel your gutsy. Celebration therapy is the topic today. Guys, a couple of months ago, I had the most incredible opportunity to go to Brooklyn and get doused in copious amounts of beautiful colored confetti. If you follow me on Instagram at that Laura Aura, I've got all kinds of photos that leads to the Confetti Project, which we're going to dig into today. But it was one of the most incredible experiences on so many aspects. And I said, you know what? I have to have you on the show to share your passion with the world. So today we welcome Jelena. She is the creator of the Confetti Project, which is this incredible photography series where she is quite literally dousing amazing humans in pounds of confetti as they explore the question, what can you celebrate? She's a creative entrepreneur with a background in psychology and design, which is brilliant, by the way. And she's always trying to create a powerful visual storytelling while provoking a space that brings back the divine art of play while surrendering to the present. Jelena, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so stoked to be here and to get deep.
Yeah, so I'm always fascinated by how people's worlds are connected. So I'm trying to even remember how I came across the Confetti Project. I think I saw someone on Instagram or something on the internet led me to it, and I was like instantly fascinated. So tell us a little bit more about the Confetti Project and where it came from and how it started and what all this gloriousness is.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you started from the beginning of how you came across it, because everyone that's participated, there's a degree of connection there, and there's a similarity with people that are drawn to it because, A, loving sparkle just as in itself, that tribe of people, but B, the reason why the project is what it is, and now 4 years later, it's still alive, is because of people that have such passion for life and are celebrators of life. That's what everyone has in common. I mean, at this point I've photographed a few thousand people, so it's really cool to be able to meet everyone that has that similarity. But to backtrack, yes, the Confetti Project, it is a photography brand where, it's a little more than just photography. I see it as a therapy session. People come into my studio in Brooklyn and you're always asked the question, what do you celebrate, before anything else happens? You walk into the space and it's all about the little details. There's lavender being diffused and there's galleries of all other people that, are doused in confetti that all look different and they're all letting go. And so you come in and you explore that, it's this opportunity for you to really kind of be like, oh, wait, if I checked in with myself, what do I celebrate? Why do I get out of bed in the morning? What's important to me right now? It's very hard, I think, in this day and age. It's so fast paced. We're all always on to the next thing or the future, or, I'll be happy when XYZ happens, whether it's this in my bank account or I'm this amount of weight or whatever it is, that in terms of delaying our aliveness and our happiness. And so, it's this opportunity to really check in with yourself and really think about, where am I at in my life right now? And then mixed with the pounds of confetti, and it really is pounds. It's like minimum 3 to 4 pounds. From the first time they throw it, this transformation happens, where anything that's happening in their life, circumstances, anxieties, stresses, are checked out the door and they're able to drop into the present moment. And that's where the confetti has magical powers. So that's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah, and I definitely want to contribute to this part of the conversation because yes. I had the chance to come to your studio in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I walked in, I was like instantly 10 times happier because like you just literally have mason jars and mason jars and mason jars full of bright, bold, colorful confetti and iridescence, and it's just color. But one of the things that I love the most is the majority of your studio is white, and then so the color just shines. And like you said, you have the lavender diffusing, and I don't know, I just felt like I went into a whole other magical world. So thank you for creating a space for humans to be able to come to be able to even experience that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you. Really, anyone that comes into the studio, we're co-creating together. It's very reciprocal. Whatever the subject, is feeling on the other end or experiencing, I'm getting that back. Just being able to witness people being comfortable, being vulnerable, and that's why I think as an artist, as a creative, as a human, I started this project in my mid-20s around the time when I realized that energy is really powerful, and anything that could change your energy in a second is really powerful. So that's why as a designer as well, and I know you can vibe with me on this, the fact that everything is white is a really great, it creates the safe space where it can contain all the color and everything, and it's a blank slate. And so thank you for coming out. I mean, it really was like very profound for me as well.
Yeah. One of the things I love too is that we sat and just got to know each other first. So you're asking about our story, and you wanted to know about, what I had going on in my business, and you just asked some of the most amazing questions. So what do you feel about a person's story is so important? Like, why does that need to be vocalized? What's the power behind that?
Yeah. Well, I have to preface with the fact that as a child, I really firmly believe that we all have our innate skills and talents and superpowers, many that are constantly being unveiled to us over our lives. When I was a child, I was always that weird kid asking people questions, and, I remember after I graduated college, and, this is in my clubbing days when I used to go to clubs. And I remember meeting someone on the dance floor, and my, my go-to question was, in a perfect world, what would you want to be? And I was getting like the most interesting answers. So I've always been very curious about people's stories, I love humans. I mean, I always have. And so within this space, it's really important because when people come to the studio or participate in the Confetti Project, most people are getting out of their comfort zone. They've never gotten their photo professionally taken. They don't really know what they're doing. There's a mystique to it that I kind of purposely create. And so for someone to be asked, what do you celebrate? Or, within the format that we did one-on-one, where it's, a more in-depth Q&A, it's a really important primer to start being comfortable with being vulnerable. And I also think when you talk about your story, I mean, all of our stories are equally important, and every single person has a story. And I really feel like all of us have many books within us, And so just like in therapy, when you're talking about yourself, it gets you in this very introspective, reflective mode that maybe we don't necessarily put ourselves in all the time because we're always on the go and we're really busy, And so with that, like when you're talking and it's in a very safe, non-judgmental space, you can have a lot of takeaways and breakthroughs just by saying things out loud, and I don't even have to say anything back or whatever, the other person doesn't, and even if not in the moment, just by being able to share your story and also engage in deep conversation with someone, which to me, and I feel like you're the same, like are some of my most cherished memories, just being in deep conversation with other humans. There's a profound kind of energetic exchange that's happening. So I find it's really important to start that way. To then when the confetti comes in and the movement and the camera and the lights that can be really intimidating, you're kind of sitting on your story while you're doing that and really being able to think about that and channel that as you're completely surrendering to play.
Yeah, I love so much of what you're saying and just the creation of the setup. I think you hit the nail on the head. We're always going 100,000 miles an hour. And just to even have the opportunity to just stop and reflect for a hot second on yourself and your life and what's what's meaningful right now. We've always got, so many things going in so many different directions, but just to be able to stop and celebrate yourself, I think there's something in that.
Definitely. And I think I've always been really interested, especially psychology being one of my backgrounds, how all of us as humans, like I find that it's in human nature to kind of like lie to yourself sometimes without even realizing, we're kind of this onion and there are many layers. And I think that's where a lot of like spirituality and that work, that constant everyday work of checking in with yourself, of implementing self-care, moments where, you're feeling a certain way and you have no idea why, and so I think, being able to talk about something, or whether it's just to yourself or with someone else, it really sheds light on so many things that are happening that maybe you're not even aware of within yourself or your life at large,
Yeah, just giving yourself the opportunity, the time and chance to even process what you're thinking, or more so what you're feeling, right? We can think a lot of stuff, but to connect with your energy and your emotions is such a beautiful gift in its own. And I think a lot of people are trained that emotions and vulnerability are bad. That's a sign of weakness. I can't show or share that, then people are going to think lesser of me. What are some of your thoughts on that concept?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely, for sure. I think we're a generation that has the opportunity to break a lot of cycles, like from the past, from our ancestors, from, our parents, the things that we inherit, like the moment we're born, and so with that, even though that is a blessing and that is wonderful, that is a huge responsibility, and it can be very challenging, and so, like, as you mentioned, how it's been viewed before is like vulnerability on one end of the spectrum and then strength on the other end of the spectrum. Like they become like antonyms of each other. That's how, my parents' generation saw it, and that goes into kind of, why, like, being in a patriarchal society, having, my dad was born during World War II. My mom, was around during, after World War II. And so we're kind of the first generation that's not directly affected by, these wars and battles and this tough love mentality and all of that. And so, yeah, I think even now as humans, we wear a lot of masks, in both a literal sense and a figurative sense, and so, it can be very challenging for people to feel safe enough to be vulnerable. But I find that when you are vulnerable and you do expose yourself and you do put yourself out there, as terrifyingly exciting as that is, because it's the unknown, I think the unknown is the number one anxiety trigger for any human, because you don't know how you're going to be perceived, I think anyone that's been vulnerable or taken a risk at any point in their life has seen that what comes back at you is like really special, because anytime you're vulnerable, people can relate to you, because we're all vulnerable. We're all insecure. We all have our traumas and our baggage and our experiences and our past and all of that. And so, anytime, a lot of the time people ask me like, what's your favorite photo or circumstance? And, that's like asking what's your favorite child, or what's your favorite, or like, what's your favorite song? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, they're different songs for different moods and things like that. But anytime someone, when I ask them, what do you celebrate? And they take that moment to be vulnerable, instead of being like, well, my family and my friends, and this is an obvious question with an obvious answer, anytime someone goes deeper, I relate to them so much and I feel it. And then I want to be vulnerable. And then we're both being vulnerable together and really connecting on a very deep level. And that's why I think when people come across this project, it's apparent in the photos and also in the stories of what people share.
Yeah, the connection that happens. I mean, basically, I feel like, most people, a lot of people really are walking around with this kind of invisible brick wall around their emotions. And when you can hear someone else be vulnerable, I love what you were saying. It's almost like the permission that you didn't need when you hear someone else being vulnerable. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I'm not the only one that feels like that. Oh, you feel like that too? Oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Like, now we can talk about it. And all of a sudden these invisible bricks start breaking down. And we just get down to the core of who we are as human beings.
Definitely. So perfectly said. I think, for me, I actually had a breakthrough very recently where after my dad passed away, actually kind of the first year when I started this project, I had a loner mentality, because he was like my hero, my protector, my best friend, all of these things. He taught me what unconditional love was. And so from when he died, I was like, I kind of felt like an orphan, like it was me against the world now. And only until last week where I had a breakdown, like a literal, like crying in the car in like a crowded parking lot, feeling, no value for my life. And, it being a little scary where, the pain was so overwhelming, like to cope with, where that transitioned into this breakthrough, where I was like, wow, I've been living alone. I've been isolating myself. I've been really creative and really feeling like it's me versus the world when, I don't have to live that way, and all of this was triggered with my mom moving in with me, and all the things that come with that, and so now it's like she's literally like in the other room and she's like, I'll be quiet for you, like all of that. And I'm like, wow, like I have someone that lives with me that cares about me and that calls me and checks in on me. And I haven't felt that in so long because one of my ways of self-medicating was isolating myself from everyone, and constantly being on the go and commuting. And so when you realize, when you take away these emotions like shame and guilt and, martyring yourself and not feeling worthy and, for whatever reasons, you realize that we're all in this together. Like we're all part of the same human family and we're a social species. And, now when I walk into rooms, like even today I was doing a bunch of errands, it's like, I have love for every single person that I come across with.
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah, this is what happens when I have a breakdown, and then it's like, oh, here's the insight. It always happens in a painful, intense, hard way. I don't know if I would have it any other way, but yeah, I think the more vulnerable you are, it's kind of like this muscle, and so the more that you lead your life in your truth and your vulnerability, you don't let yourself be defined by your insecurities or whatever fear you have associated with showing your fullest self, and you're constantly talking with people in a very profound, deep way because you're giving people permission to also be vulnerable. I call it like this ripple effect. It's like when you walk into a room and you're magnetizing, and it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are or any of those superficial things that we think are important on paper. It's like if you're owning who you are and living in your own truth, people are magnetized by that. And you're giving people permission that maybe you've never even talked with moment with. Just by you being yourself, you're giving them permission to be who they are. And then that spreads, that ripples, through, other rooms that those people walk into, and then, and so on. So yeah, vulnerability to me is like, it's the same as strength. It's a synonym for me.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, the entire premise of the Gutsy podcast is tearing down walls and being vulnerable so that people know that they're not alone. And I always find it fascinating too, how many people really want to help or be involved once they know what's going on. Like you mentioned with your mom, how she just quickly jumped to it. And, it's just like a no-brainer. I think sometimes we put ourselves in this position where we feel a nuisance or a bother or one more thing for someone else. But I always find it amazing that when you just open up, people literally just come pouring in. Like, how can I help? How can I be part of this? What do you need? And that in its own is powerful.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very, I think that's the detriment of allowing whatever negative emotions to fuel your life because, I know for me, I'll use my experience of, really having this loner mentality. There were moments where I felt really isolated from the rest of the world, and even when I was feeling very low, like, hysterically crying, in my car in the parking lot, I felt, when you feel like your life doesn't have any value and you feel really upset, you're really like isolating who you are against everyone else. Like you're creating so many walls and your brain is playing tricks on you. You're thinking, oh, if for me, I'll be really real about it. I was like, if I died right now, like no one would care, and it's thoughts like that, like along those lines of, feeling like everyone is over there and you're here, and that in my brain, when I'm feeling low, it's like my life sucks and everyone else's life is perfect. And you create more space between you and the rest of the world, when in reality, like, people do care and people do want to help. They just, don't know because you've been concealing it or, compartmentalizing parts of yourself, and that's why, when you think about school shooting and, even bullying and, people that have, these different issues, I think that's the stem of it, where you become so isolated that you feel like you don't have anything in common ground or familiarity with the rest of other humans, and that compassion and empathy that comes with that.
That's so true. I never really thought about it that way. I mean, trauma really has a way of nudging its way into your life. And I think that there's something beautiful about a time frame where sometimes, as uncomfortable as it is, but sometimes you literally have to just sit in the shit, right? Like, you have to feel the emotion. You have to go through whatever your mind and your body needs to go through. I think the trick is to not allow yourself to stay there forever. And that can be really challenging.
Yes, definitely. It was, I'm not going to lie, last week, I felt this way a few times, but I was a little scared for how deep I went. I see it as kind of like this like rabbit hole, and we all have the potential to let everything fall apart, and it's just a matter of how, like you said, like, if you're going to stay there and decide to stay there for a while, and then you kind of get deeper and deeper into it. And, there was like a moment where I was like, wow, like, this is kind of scary how deep I can go into this, but then ultimately having, trust in yourself. And, for me, anytime I feel a certain type of way, there are two things I remind myself. A, it's temporary, just like anything in life is temporary. And B, someone in the history of humanity has felt the way that I felt. And for me, that's a really big comfort knowing that, and that's what, what we were talking about before. When you share your vulnerability, you'd be surprised that people can really resonate with whatever you're feeling. It doesn't matter what emotion, what circumstance. I truly believe that we all feel the same thing, but in different ways at different times.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
So this then is a good transition into, you've just finished your first book called Cancer and Confetti. And wow, I mean, the title of that book alone is just gives me chills. So 1 year, 100 people. Tell us a little bit about that journey. I know that you've mentioned your dad and the profound effect that he's had on your life and how all this has shaped you. So just walk us down through that journey a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess the title Cancer and Confetti, it is about the first year that I started the Confetti Project. So yes, it was in my room in Brooklyn. People came to me. I was meeting people for the first time, in this really intimate space, and really honing the process. I didn't know what I was doing, like in the beginning. All I knew was that there was something there and that I owed it to myself to explore it, just like a lot of us do. We come at these crossroads in different facets in our life. And so that was unfolding. At the same time, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. So for an entire year, I was either dousing people in confetti or I was going back home and helping my dad fight for his life. And anytime someone would ask me, how are you? What's up? How's it going? I'd be like, in the most succinct way, my life is cancer and confetti. Like, I was living in these two dimensions that, when you talk about it, they're seemingly opposing, right? One is celebration, one is death and sickness, but I was given the gift to be smack in the middle of them, kind of alternating between the two, and really realizing that they have way more in common than one would think. And that, we would love to put our pain in one corner and our pleasure in another corner, the cancer and confetti, right? But our life is always going to be both of those things intertwined all the time. So with that said, you have to celebrate everything. You do. And so I was kind of realizing that while it was happening, but really when he passed away after that year, that's when everything kind of came together and crystallized. And how really it wasn't a coincidence that my first purpose was unveiled through the Confetti Project while my first hero was dying, and how they both really fueled one another in the sense that when I was grieving, I was able to tap into gratitude, which really is what celebration means, I feel. It's like when you're celebrating something, it's really like taking a pause from your life, right? Like you're celebrating, think about the things that we normally celebrate, like birthdays, graduations, like milestones, you're taking a pause from your life and you're like, let me commemorate this moment, this time, And so didn't realize it at the time, but through photographing and dousing 100 people with confetti, by the time my dad died, I was able to cultivate that same gratitude and that same celebration, which to me are like synonymous, even amidst grieving and, being fatherless and, going through some of the most painful parts of my life. So the book starts with that. And then it goes into literally up until now, pretty much, the 3-year journey of that kind of happening. And then the very pivotal moment of when my father passed away when I was 26. And then, the years of, being fatherless and grieving. And, really for me, I want to destigmatize death, because as painful as it was for my father to die, death is like the most universal truth. It's not a surprise, even though to many of us it is. For me, I never really thought of death before my father died. And so with him dying, it kind of smacked me in the face. And I think that happens to a lot of people because we don't really talk about death, even though it's a very natural, part of the cyclical process of life, And so for me, the aim for the book is by sharing the story, and really being honest that grief is one of my favorite emotions. And by my father dying, my life has been so enriched. And I was able to be catapulted into a heightened dimension of consciousness where I have this X-ray vision into other people's suffering, other people that are part of the Dead Parents Club or that have experienced loss, which, spoiler alert, is going to be all of us if we haven't yet. And so I think it's really important to have this conversation where you can use death like as inspiration to live your life to the fullest and celebrate every single moment, no matter what it brings, even if it's filled with challenge or adversity, not putting labels on your moments or a hierarchy on it being like quote unquote good or bad, but seeing it all as equal and everything's a learning lesson. And ultimately every moment that you're given, which is really all we have are moments, and it's easy to take that for granted as a young, able-bodied person, but any moment you're given is a blessing. So that's really what the book explores, kind of the aftermath of losing a parent at a young age.
Wow, that is such a beautiful angle on life and death and celebration and just everything in general. I would bet there's a lot of people thinking, this sounds magical, but maybe I am grieving right now, or I'm going through something, or something triggers an old grief. How does one transform that intense pain into something so positive like you have? Like how does that even transpire?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe rewinding a little bit in the sense of grief is very individual for every person.
True.
And in the book, I even write kind of like a list of different factors that affect people's grieving process. And so, for me, I had a really deep connection with my father. We talked about death way before he got sick. I knew how he wanted to go. He was always like, I want to go in an instant. I don't want to be sick. That's not a life that I want to be alive for, that quality of life. I want to have all my power, all my faculties. So I was very aware of who he was and how he viewed his life and death. And so for me, he was sick for a really long time. And it was a really agonizingly slow process where, this kind of shows you a little bit of his sense of humor. By the end of it, he was like, is God on vacation? Like, and I was like, Dad, you're going to die. Don't worry. Like, you're going to die. And, and that goes into another thing of, if you do have a loved one that is sick and you're, in the hospital and really in the medical system, you have to advocate for them. And so I did my best trying to fight for him and speak up for him when he couldn't do it anymore. So really, because it was such a slow process, it was really painful for him because he was in a lot of pain, and it was very, he was even apologizing to me and my family, feeling like he's a burden, that it was going on for so long, and, all the sacrifices that we gave, to be with him and care for him. Whereas, not coincidentally, my best friend lost her father exactly 6 months before mine, but in the exact opposite way. She was in Vietnam. She got a phone call. He had a brain aneurysm. He was dead in a minute. And so how does that affect our grieving processes? Like for me, it was easy because I had closure. I was able to say everything that I wanted to say to my father, and it was normalized because he was sick for so long. We knew it was going to happen. Versus for her, it was so unexpected. It was this tragic instant thing. And so we've been, bonded by, our grief and being able to be there for one another and really seeing all the different facets of grief. And that's really where my fascination with death started, because I started thinking like, wow, like our fathers died in the exact opposite way. We both had really close relationships with our fathers, and our grieving is probably so different, And so I think, having more of the conversation of being aware of all those factors, and, it's so individualistic. So I feel lucky that I was very close with my father, and I really looked up to him, and he really was a hero for me. That for me, when I'm grieving, letting the grief come. I think that's with any emotion, right? Like what we were talking about before, when you're feeling a certain type of way. Yes, knowing when to get out of it. I think that's very important because that's in all of our power, but also like not stopping it, because I think it's more detrimental. Like I'll give an example. When my grief comes, and, for anyone that's lost someone, it's the triggers are very random and they're non-linear, and grief is something that is like with you for the rest of your life. It's not, a lot of the time it's talks about like, oh, are you done grieving? Or, grief happens right after the person dies. It's like you have a void that will never be filled for the rest of your life. And that's okay. You learn how to cope with it. It becomes a part of you. And so for me, when my grief comes or when I trigger it, which I do, I'm a big crier. I love to cry. It's such a catharsis for me. So sometimes I'll even listen to my dad's voicemail, like the last thing he ever said to me. And I'll start crying and I'll start getting hysterical. And it's usually me sobbing on the floor to the point of exhaustion. And even in that moment, because I'm allowing it to happen, there's such beauty there. I feel such gratitude because it reminds me that I'm alive. And it's also indicative of how deep my love was for him, that I could feel so deeply his presence and his memory, and then, our relationship, after his physical existence is here, within his afterlife. And so I think that's the first thing is when you have grief or when you feel depressed or whatever certain type of emotion or something that you're going through, to welcome it and to not inflict double suffering on yourself by deflecting it or not letting it come or whatever self-defense mechanisms you have or conditioned habits or avoiding it. And, a last note is that the Confetti Project has been the ultimate therapy for me, and healing. I've met so many people that have lost others, and I've witnessed fathers and daughters and mothers and daughters and best friends and siblings. And it's so beautiful for me to witness that. And I feel my father anytime I see unconditional love present in my studio, but at the same time, I've gotten to see with other people in my family, like my sisters, what it's like when you don't allow yourself to properly grieve and give yourself that space, and let it come, where, randomly you'll start crying and you have no idea why, or you'll be really, really angry and you don't know why either, and so I think those are kind of the main things of how to utilize it to inspire yourself. And for me, like my dad was such an extraordinary person in my eyes that I channel him, and I feel like that's my way of honoring that person, because ultimately whoever you've lost, even though they're not here to tell you anymore, that they would want you to lead a life that's filled with joy and that you don't have any regrets about when you get to the end of it. And so they would want that for you. That's permission for you. That's a blessing for you to keep going with your life, and to not let grief cripple you and define you, but to let it empower you, and inspire you to really lead like your fullest life in honor of that person.
Wow. Yes to all of that. I mean, it's just, you just have just a beautiful way of looking at things that typically people want to just put in a box and shove underneath their emotional bed. And, I don't want to think that or feel that today. And one of the things that I love most about what you were just saying is just allowing it. I mean, it's so, no matter what the emotion is, good, bad, or in between, it's just the same as with excitement. If you tone it down, you're bottling it. If you're feeling sad and you force yourself into something good, you're bottling it. So just giving it the space to do what it needs to do. And then the beauty about that, I mean, one of the many beautiful things is it's like it's like a release valve, right? It just gives it its opportunity. It's like saying to yourself, I see you. I understand we need to feel like this. So let's just give it our all. We're a team right now. And then it dissipates, and, sure, it may come back around and maybe it doesn't, but it had its time when it needed it in your life versus trying to figure out, okay, well, I'll be alone later, so maybe I can cry later on. So right now I'm just going to swallow it and put on my big girl pants and do what I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You said it so beautifully. And, this is the first time I'm talking about this, like about the book and all that, because I just finished it. So thank you for holding the space for me to, again, just speak about my story and process, the past year of kind of it just being me, myself, and I, in my mind. But grief really is my favorite emotion. It's one of my favorites. I know that's really weird to say, but because it's the last thing I have of my dad. You know what I mean? It's like when I'm in my grief, I feel him. Like I reach my hand out. It's like I could feel him. Like he's right there, And to me, that's so beautiful because it's like, I'm 29 and it's, it's sad thinking about, he's not going to see me as a mother. He's not going to see my children. I'm never going to see him in this lifetime in physical form. The permanence of it can be very, very sad, to come to grasp with that. But when I feel this grief, I love it. I feel such a beauty in it because I feel like I'm communicating with him and I feel like I'm really able to feel him within me. And that to me is such a blessing,
It's just such a beautiful outlook. I know that so many people are just going to listen to this and be like, I just feel a sigh of relief on people's energies. So thank you for being so vulnerable to share this with us because I think it is so powerful. And you were right. Someone in the history of humanity has felt like this. And the fact that you're able to take something that feels so daunting and then combine it with something that's so creatively liberating. I mean, it's just, in my eyes, it's absolutely brilliant. So the concept of celebration therapy, that whole process is, I was thinking about it today. I'm like, I think when I went into it, I did not expect to have an emotional response to it. And I would bet that that's probably on purpose. It's not, everyone has their own experience with it, right? So if we can, I'd love to talk a little bit about, what transforms in people when you're going through some of these sessions, because in my experience, I remember that you were like, grab bunches of handfuls and throw them around. And at first it's this like, I'm kind of making a big mess and I'll just, okay, TV. And I throw it up in the air a little bit and you're like, no, I want you to grab more. And eventually you just like took all the buckets and you're like, I want you to scoop up your arms and just play with it. Just play. And then before I knew it, I was like a whole nother person. So is that a typical type of experience, or what do you see when people are all of a sudden faced with this enormous amount of confetti?
Yeah. That's God, you asked the best questions. I love it. I mean, I think again, when people step onto the set, we're all at different points in our life, once we get there, and so everyone's really different and everyone has their kind of different capabilities of how much they want to let go, what they want to let go, for some women that's being self-conscious and body image, body dysmorphia, feeling like you need to be perfect or, as women being conditioned to be objects of beauty. Anytime we see a camera in front of us, like striking a certain pose or whatever, I see that a lot, dismantling that, and just letting go. There have definitely been people that have had OCD or overthinkers or people that are overly responsible, and, being like, tiptoeing into the confetti and, like you said, like throwing a little bit and being like, oh my God, this is a mess. Like, am I allowed, and, people that are constantly like, can I do this? Is this okay? And, that's why I say in the beginning, you can do whatever you want. Like, you don't need permission to do anything. Just like in life, this is one big metaphor, so it's that, having confidence, feeling like you can make a mess and that it's all about the process and not the result. And that, you don't need to be perfect. That's not the point of any of this. And so that's a lot of it. Children just dive into it. They don't have that. They don't have as many walls or, like insecurities or your things, it's very instantaneous with them, and with everyone, this beautiful transformation happens. Not only are they able to let go, and again, for some people it's just for a split second. For others, it's like you mentioned with your experience, it's a moment that happens and then you kind of feel like you're in new territory again, whether it's, if you've been running for 30 minutes and you're in a trance or, you're having deep conversation with someone and you completely lose track of time and space, it's those spaces, right? Where you just feel so in the moment and you're not thinking about anything else. You're not doing anything else. You're not trying to look a certain way. You're just being, and so that's what the confetti helps to do. That's where the magical powers of the confetti come in.
I truly believe you. The confetti really does have magical powers. It was just running my fingers through it and just watching it like fall down through. And I don't know, I just remember, there's lavender going and you cranked up the music and we were just like, just having a conversation and talking and playing. And I just remember like halfway through, all of a sudden, I feel like I became my own. I went from this like needing permission, may I do this? What you were talking about before. I love that confetti is a metaphor for life because it's so true. Because then by the time we were done, I didn't want it to be over with. And I don't even know if I ever told you this, but I was wearing a kind of shirt that had these like secret like pocket type things.
Yeah.
And but I wear that shirt, we'll get confetti pieces, and Angel will be like, there's a piece of your confetti. And I'm like, it's always a part of me now.
Oh, that's actually a great point. That's another thing about it. It's like, in the space, this transformation happens. Or maybe, for some people it doesn't, I mean, they have their version of it, they were able to have fun and maybe they didn't go really deep with it, or allow themselves to go there. But I'm a firm believer in everything being like a seed that's planted, so sometimes things come your way or you experience it and maybe you don't get it in that moment, but it becomes part of you. And then it opens up at another point in your life, and you, all of a sudden it hits you and you get it and you're like, yeah. And so it's really interesting with the, it's funny. I tell people when I photograph, there's two subjects, there's the human and there's the confetti. And it's like how they interact with one another. And so when people leave, they look so different, I mean, you look so different. I remember exactly the moment for me behind the lens when I felt like you went into that playful, vulnerable, completely surrendering, relinquishing any control or permission territory. Like it's visible when that happens, And so, not only do people look different when they leave, but they trail confetti as they go. And it's in different nooks and crannies of, their pants and their bra and their shoes and all those things. Yeah. And so I've found, with me, I just trail it wherever I go, but I've heard from many people that have done it, even years ago, like in the beginning, where they'll randomly find a piece. And it'll be during a moment where they really needed that reminder to not take the moment so seriously. So
that gives me chills.
So there's a residue. There's like it follows you and it pops up when you're meant to see it. So I just think that's it's a very living, breathing thing to me, confetti. And for me, it's always a red piece. it's always this red piece. And, it's like if I'm waiting at the doctor's and I'm getting a little bit of anxiety, or I'm getting back home and I'm so exhausted and just feeling so depleted, and it'll come on my pillow or on the floor or, somewhere random. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's supposed to be about fun. This whole thing of life is like, it's supposed to be about fun. I'm taking it too seriously. Like release any attachment you have to anything in this moment, even if it's your pain and suffering and exhaustion, and just be open, and just celebrate it, have fun with it. So
it's funny that yours is red. Now that I'm really thinking about this, now I'm going to be extra conscious of this. Mine is always the silver part of it. So I have to tell everyone too. So you hand punched my confetti because the colors that I wanted, apparently there are standard confetti colors. One would not know that. And the colors that you picked off of, the sources and stuff that I gave you are our business colors, which are chartreuse and teal. And you're like, oh shit, they don't make that. So you were watching, if I'm not mistaken, like a Netflix series or something, and my confetti.
Oh my God. I was thinking this when I was like a second ago, and I was like thinking about the journey of, your confetti colors and all of that. So yes, that's very true. They're specialty colors. So confetti is mostly made in like just the primary colors. There's some offshoots of that, but those are the main ones. And, if you want a specialty color, it's just wild. It's like, a minimum order of like 100 pounds, which I'm for, the more confetti, the better, but that's a lot. And so, for me, I love anything that's with my hands and DIY, especially since so much of, my design work, my photography work is digital. And so I was like, let me see what I can do. So I got a bunch of tissue paper, and I got all these like different size hole punchers from Michael's. And I was like, let's watch, I think it was like The Making of a Killer or something on Netflix. Like it was like one of those crime
murder show.
Yeah. Yeah. And literally hole punching while watching this like dark, intense documentary style show. And it took forever. It was a little bit of a black hole, I have to say, but it was good. Again, I find beauty in all of my moments, and so even if one feels dark and never ending, because, even the amount that we had for you, which wasn't a crazy amount, it wasn't, I want to say it was probably 1 pound together. That took probably 4 or 5 hours of just hole punching, like, cause it wasn't automatic. Like it would get stuck in the hole punch, and, it wasn't, yeah. So yeah, but I always remember that. And it was really special. I feel like I was able to kind of like, put even more emotion and feeling into the confetti that you were then going to be completely doused in.
Yeah, I love it. I can't thank you enough, because I literally, like, I walked in and I was like, oh my God, it's perfect. And I have it in my office. I look at it every day. It shows up in my house. There's silver embedded in my carpet. So when we came to visit you, we stayed in Brooklyn, and our hotel room looked like New Year's Eve happened. It was hilarious. And everywhere I went, it just looked like a party. We went out to dinner after I left your studio, and I didn't take it off my face. I didn't rub it. I just literally left it the way that it was. And I was like, you know what? I'm in this beautiful unicorn shit, and I just want to be who I am right now. And the waiters and the waitresses and people were looking, and they're like, you look like you've had a great time. I'm like, I've had a life-shifting experience, and I just want to thank you for creating that space for people, because we do take things very seriously. There are a lot of serious things going on, especially when owning a business. I mean, there's a whole nother level of stuff that we could have a whole nother episode on with that. But just being able to take time and play and be silly and know that that's okay. Like, you don't need permission to play. So thank you for creating that space for people.
Thank you for co-creating it with me and supporting it. It really, the only reason why it's still going is I see it as this thing where it's for the people, by the people, and that's, I've really shifted the way that I go about it, even in the past month or two. Because don't I know it, owning a business and being an entrepreneur is like, yeah, there's a quote where it's like, being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building a plane while you're jumping off the cliff,
yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's really intense. And you have to wear a lot of different hats that kind of take you away from why you started it and your favorite parts of it. It's like the stuff that you put up with to be able to do the parts of it that you love. And so I've recently, kind of reshifted it and just really focusing on people and doing meaningful social awareness campaigns about marginalized communities, marginalized topics, things that are stigmatized, really, talking about these themes that are really important, like mental health, like insecurities, like pride, like, body image, all of these different things, instead of, just waiting to work with brands and things like that, which has really been the MO for the past year with the brand. So everyone that has participated in it, and anyone that's supported it, anyone that's, given me kind words or followed it or in any capacity, like it's just as much theirs as it is mine. This is something that's bigger than myself. I'm very aware of that. And yeah, the only reason why it's still going is because of, everyone that comes out and walks into the space. So thank you.
Absolutely. So my last question for you today is, what does gutsy mean to you?
Ooh, I love that. Gutsy. I think gutsy means, like we said before, bringing it full circle, being vulnerable. And what vulnerable means is being strong and being resilient and taking risks and seeing what happens, and not letting yourself get in the way of it too much, or anyone else. I think for me, the Confetti Project was the first thing I ever finished in my life. It first started as a 3-month photography challenge where I was like 50 New Yorkers, 3 months. I'm going to make a coffee table book out of it. I invented all these opportunities. And, before I would just like stop things, I never fully executed anything. I cared about what other people thought, even within the process of getting 50 people, which is a feat in itself to schedule 50 New Yorkers to do something in 3 months. I was so focused on the end goal that anyone that was like, not giving me an answer, or, friends that didn't do it, I was like, I'm on this train. It's going to keep going. You can hop on, but it's going to keep going, And so I think it was the first thing, by being the first thing I ever finished, I found my gutsy, because I got so empowered by finishing something for the first time. And so with that, it becomes really contagious. It's like, oh, I finished this when I set my mind to it. Let's see how it looks like when I do that with this in this part of my life and this. And slowly but surely, you start leading a life where you're raising the bar and it's completely limitless, And so I associate being gutsy with being limitless. You don't life is already hard. We don't have to make it double hard with the, internal prisons that we have of self-limitation, or that the world puts on us, or that we interpret as limitation. So that's what gutsy means to me.
Oh my gosh. I could just put that on a poster on the wall. Oh my gosh. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. This has been, I think, one of my favorite conversations ever. I can't wait for our listeners to tune in. I know the $1 million question right now is, everyone wants to know, where can they find you? How should they connect with you? Where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, well, I guess people mostly find it on Instagram. So yeah, there's, it's the Confetti Project with underscores between each word on Instagram. And then if you want to explore ways to participate, you can go on the website, theconfettiproject.com. We're also on Facebook, The Confetti Project. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty simple, just those 3 things for now. But yeah, it's pretty much it.
Simple is better most of the time. That's amazing. And guys, we'll have all of those links in the show notes. Definitely check out the Confetti Project and all the amazing things that she's got going on. I'm also going to put in a link. So there's a landing page on her website for my photo shoot and the story behind celebrating possibility. It was just one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced. So definitely check out Jelena's The Confetti Project. Your eyes are just in for a wonder. Join me this Thursday for our Power Back. Listen, we talk about and ask for greatness, but are you really prepared to receive it? This week's Power Back is going to be all about cultivating the energy that requires being able to accept the greatness that you're asking for. Until then, follow the Gutsy Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And for more Gutsy insight, follow me personally on Instagram @Laura. See you next time.